Welcome back to Euro Fantasy 2024. This will be a how to play guide, and by the end of this video and podcast, you'll know everything you need to about Euro Fantasy, and it will feel like home, just like you're playing FPL or whatever you're used to in terms of fantasy football. For those that have played UCL Fantasy, this will be identical. The key change lies in the number of transfers you can make, particularly in the knockout stages, but I'll delve into that very soon and talk about the chips in the wildcard and limitless, the amount of transfers you can make, also the captaincy, substitutions, and much more. If you end up enjoying this video, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Our aim is to get this to over 200 likes on YouTube and to keep on pushing towards 24,000 subscribers and beyond. Check out all the other links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram, the Patreon Championships Discord server, Euro Fantasy League, which you can see on screen as well. The league code is JCRHjQ, and there is an auto-join link in the description as well, so that'll be much easier to join. And we already have hundreds of members. We're close to getting to 1,000 and to become one of the most popular Euro Fantasy leagues in the world. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. I would highly recommend you check out the rules section in the UEFA website for Euro Fantasy Football, and that's very integral in terms of getting all the information you need. I'll be highlighting the key things you need to know. I'm not going to read out everything and overload you with random details. I'm going to break down exactly what you need to know. And in Euro Fantasy, just like with UCL Fantasy, you have match days, and it's pretty much the same as game weeks in FPL, but they're known as match days here, and you have different days within a match day, and that's what plays a key role in making substitutions and captaincy different to most other fantasy formats. And as you can see here, one of the first things you really need to know about Euro Fantasy is that you can make substitutions or switch your captain. And the way it works is you can have a player playing in the opener between Germany and Scotland, let's say Florian Wirtz as an example, and you can captain him as well. And if you're not happy with his performance, and let's say he blanks, for example, delivers 2 points, and you want more from your captain, and you also want to make a substitution, you can then substitute him out after that game is finished and before the players that are yet to play have started their game, and you can then make that substitution and or change the captaincy at the same time. And I'll show you a actual example later on, just so that it makes it much clearer to you. So that means that if any of your starting players doesn't score as many points as you would have liked, you can sub them off for a player on your bench who is yet to play. That is the key thing. You can't substitute someone out for someone who has played already. It has to be for someone who hasn't played yet. And if you have any questions about this particular aspect or anything to do with Euro Fantasy, leave them in the comment section down below and your questions will be answered. Then in terms of picking a team name, very simple. It's not that relevant in terms of fantasy points, of course, but you can actually pick any name you want up until matchday 1 begins. Once that happens, your team name is locked. So be sure to lock that in as soon as possible and make sure you're happy with your team name, although that's not too relevant in the grand scheme of things. Now, just like with FPL and UCL Fantasy, you pick 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, and 3 forwards with 100 million in budget, and you get an additional 5 million for the knockout stages in matchday 4. So no matter what you've built up in terms of squad value, and the way you do that is by buying the best players who score points that people are buying in, their price will go up. And once that happens, you can gain additional value. And it's so important to start well in these fantasy formats like World Cup Fantasy, Euro Fantasy, and UCL Fantasy as well, especially when we don't have many match days in general, only 7 for the Euros. And in terms of the number of players per team, this is also very important. So just like in FPL, it's only 3 players in the group stages, but that increases as we get through to the competition into the latter stages. And it's the exact same as UCL Fantasy in terms of 4 players from the same team in the round of 16. You can get up to 5 in the quarterfinals, 6 for the semi-finals, and then 8 for the final. So that's exactly the same as UCL Fantasy as well. And if any of your players are knocked out of Euro 2024, they'll stay in your squad and you can keep them there for the rest of the tournament if you want. However, once they're out of the competition, of course, they won't score any more points, and you can create a team at any point of the competition, but I'd highly recommend you do that before matchday 1 begins. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at a severe disadvantage. Now, in terms of managing your squad, for each match day throughout the competition, you'll need to select 11 players from a 15-player squad. And the key thing here in Euro Fantasy, just like in UCL Fantasy, is to make sure that those on your bench aren't playing on the first day. What you'd ideally want to do is have players playing on the 17th or 18th of June, as an example, for match day 1, all on your bench, and then you can bring them on if some of the players that play on the 14th or 15th of June don't score that many points, and that maximizes the chances you have of scoring a lot of points within a match day. Hopefully that's all very clear, but I will show you many examples throughout in all my videos and podcasts and the deadline stream, so you will be absolutely clear on that before we begin Euro Fantasy. This will be obvious for seasoned players of fantasy football, but for those that are very new, the points that are scored for your team are all in your starting 11. Those on your bench won't score any points whatsoever, even if you had them in your starting 11 originally and made manual substitutions throughout the match day. And if you change the captaincy, the original captain you had, their points that were doubled will no longer be doubled once you change the captaincy. For every match day except match day 7, the Euros final, you'll be able to sub players in and out depending on their performances, with the aim of ending the match day with the highest scoring 11 players from your squad in your 11. However, you can only sub in players who haven't played yet in the match day, which is once again very crucial, and also what they say at the beginning of that paragraph. So in match day 7 for the final, you cannot make substitutions. I'm experiencing the same thing in UCL Fantasy for match day 13. I've uploaded the team selection and the best wildcard and limitless team already. I'll be going live on Saturday for the Champions League final in the deadline stream, but that is important. For every single match day except for the last one, you cannot make substitutions and also change the captaincy. That is also very crucial, and you'll need to save your team before each team match day deadline. Make sure you do that, because sometimes people don't save it and then they find out that some of their players from the first day within a match day are on their bench, which is the worst thing that could possibly happen. If any of your starting players don't play in that match day, they'll be automatically replaced by your subs as long as formation rules aren't broken, and also as long as you haven't made any manual substitutions yourself. Otherwise that cancels the ability to make automatic substitutions like you would see in FPL. But I would highly recommend being in control of your transfers, your substitutions, and also changing the captaincy. Don't leave anything to chance, and most likely the players you are selecting are going to feature, whether it's off the bench, getting a one-pointer for a few minutes as a cameo, or starting the game itself. So it's really important to make manual substitutions and don't kind of rely on automatic ones to bail you out. In terms of formations, I see this question a lot in terms of in the last Euro Fantasy tournament in Euro 2020, a few years ago, we had the ability to click a button which then changed the formations on the home screen when you're building your starting 11. You can't do that now, so then people are going to ask, how do you change the formation? The way you change it is by making substitutions yourself. So let's say, for example, you have a 3-5-2 in your starting 11 and you want to change to a 4-4-2. You then bring on a defender from your bench for a midfielder, and that changes the formation to a 4-4-2. So hopefully that's very clear, but I'll get that question, I'm sure, in the deadline streams and all of that, and I'll be very happy to answer them so long as it isn't heavily repeated. And in terms of selecting a captain as well, which I have alluded to several times already, every time you save your team, you'll need to pick a captain from your starting 11. That player's points will be doubled for that match day. If your captain doesn't score as highly as you would like, you'll have the option to switch to another player who is in action on a later day within that match day. This gives you the chance to score double the score for a different player you think will do better. However, bear in mind that if you aren't happy with your new captain's score, you won't be able to change back to your original captain, and you can't ever select a captain who's already played in that match day. You can only change it to players who haven't played within a match day at that point of the competition. And that's pretty much all you need to know about the captaincy. If you have any more questions or comments, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. In terms of substitutions, which is one of the biggest factors and key differences between this and FPL, between match days, you can make as many subs as you like within your squad after all matches on a single day have finished, and before the next matches within that match day kick off, you can sub out a maximum of 4 players unless they've been sent off. If a player gets a red card, you can't substitute them out. I've experienced that in UCL Fantasy with Wan-Bissaka back in match day 1 against Young Boys. It wasn't pretty. I was crying. It is what it is. In terms of changing your captain as well, I've alluded to that many times before as well. It works quite similarly, but you can change your captain and sub out 4 players. Everyone on your bench, the goalkeeper and 3 outfield players, can come on for the low scoring players in your starting 11, and once again ensure that those on your bench aren't playing on the first or second days. Ideally, you don't want to lose out on points as a result, and that's really going to minimize your chances of getting Euro Fantasy points. Many of these points will be repeated, but one key thing I want to kind of reiterate is that once you confirm your substitutions or change the captaincy, you cannot reverse these decisions. But check out the Eurofantasy website and the rules section. It's very important and it will cover everything you need to know. I'm kind of highlighting the most important information that will help you compete with the best managers in Eurofantasy, even those that are seasoned managers who have a lot of experience under their belt. Automatic substitutions is something I don't want to cover too much because, as I keep on recommending, manual substitutions is the way to go. Micromanaging your team, it does require a bit of effort and a lot of time invested, but once the deadline is locked in for a match day, all you need to do is really spend a couple of minutes at most making substitutions and taking out your low scoring players for those that are yet to play, and change the captaincy to someone you think could do very well on the next day or wherever it may be. And one other thing that I'd highly recommend is having options on each day, so that maximizes your chances for captaincy points and being able to switch to captaincy at will. It's not too relevant in terms of substitutions as long as you don't have everyone playing on the 14th and 15th. That wouldn't be an ideal thing in terms of team structure and balance, but that's not too relevant there. I think for the captaincy, you'd want to have one option at least playing on each day, even if it's a kind of weaker player. Let's say, for example, you only have Jules Koundé from France on the 17th of June and nobody else on that day. Well, you can just captain Koundé and see what you can bring. And with ball recovery points, which I'll get onto very soon, defenders and defensive midfielders can still offer great value because of ball recoveries. But in terms of automatic substitutions, I won't do and then that automatic sub can kick in. But the most important thing next up is the transfers, and it's very similar to UCL Fantasy, but there are some differences, especially in the knockouts. So transferring players in and out of your squad helps you get more points throughout the tournament. It goes without saying, doesn't it, Euro Fantasy? Throughout the competition, you get free transfers each match day where no points will be deducted from your score. The number of free transfers you can make depends on the stage of the competition. Bear in mind that if any of your players get injured or become unavailable for any reason, you won't get any extra free transfers to compensate. For every transfer you make beyond your quota of free transfers, you'll have 4 points deducted from your total. Because of the way points are calculated, this will be deducted from your overall score rather than your match day score. And of course, that's pretty much the exact same as UCL Fantasy, FPL, World Cup Fantasy, and the like. But one key difference between this and World Cup Fantasy from a few years ago is that you can't make transfers within a match day as you could in that fantasy format, which resulted in a lot of loopholes and problems in that game. This will be exactly like Euro Fantasy Football a few years ago. Before the round of 16 in match day 4, you get unlimited transfers yet again, and then for the quarterfinals in match day 5, you get free transfers. For the semi-finals, you get 4 free transfers, and for the Euros final, you get 5 free transfers as well. So during the group stages, if you don't use your free transfers between match days, you'll only be able to carry one forward to the next match day, meaning you can't stockpile free transfers over several rounds. So basically, you can get up to free transfers if you roll the transfer in match day 2 or 3, but you can't stockpile any more than that, as it explicitly states right there. If you use your wildcard or limitless chip, then no free transfers get carried forward. You'd only have 2 free transfers in the following match day in the group stages. And once the knockouts begin, you can't roll transfers over. So going into the quarterfinals, if you use 2 free transfers and not 3, it doesn't matter. You're not going to have an additional transfer going into the semi-finals and then have 5 free transfers there instead of the 4 that everyone else gets. So you can't roll transfers over in the knockouts, only in the group stages where you can have up to 3 free transfers and no more. Once the matchday free deadline passes, some players' prices will be adjusted based on their performances in the previous games. Price will keep changing throughout the season depending on how many points players score. So player performances is the most important thing, and in terms of their points tallies rather than in terms of transfer activity like it would be in FPL, but that is very crucial for player prices. Once we get to matchday 3 and the deadline passes, the changes in price will be evident and you will be able to see that, and it's very crucial when building your squad in matchday 4 using unlimited transfers. And by the way, we're going to get to the chips very soon. You can't use the wildcard or limitless in matchday 1 or 4 because we have unlimited transfers to use already. Now, in terms of the deadlines, it's the same as the last Euro tournament, UCL and World Cup Fantasy. The first game of the match day, when that kicks off, the deadline has passed, and in this case, the 14th of June, when Germany hosts Scotland, that will be the deadline when that game kicks off at 8 p.m. UK time. In FPL, it's 1 hour 30 minutes before the first game of a match day or game week kicks off, and that's quite UK centric. Here, I think most people will prefer the deadlines and how they operate, and we can have a quick look at all of the deadlines right here. So match day 1, the 14th of June at 9 p.m. Central European time. In match day 2, it's the 19th of June. Match day 3 will have a deadline of the 23rd of June. Round of 16 is on the 29th. And for the quarterfinals, it's the 5th of July, the semi-finals, the 9th of July, and finally for the final, the 14th of July. So exactly 1 month of football in the Euros. It should be a good one. And it was the exact same last time. I think it was the 11th of June to the 11th of July back in 2021. And also for the chips, here we go. We only have 2 of them, and the wildcard is quite familiar to any of you who have played FPL and UCL Fantasy, and this table kind of summarizes everything for the wildcard and the limitless. So you only have 1 wildcard and limitless to use throughout the entire tournament, and both of them give you unlimited transfers, but the wildcard doesn't give you unlimited budget. The limitless does, and the limitless only lasts for a specific match day, whilst the wildcard will stick for the rest of the tournament if you wish, and the team resets once match day is over. No for the wildcard and yes for the limitless. So in essence, the limitless is a free hit with no budget restrictions for a single match day. Then your team reverts to how your squad was like before you activated the chip, whilst the wildcard, every single change you make will stick there. So it also gives you details about each chip in particular. So the wildcard gives you the chance to change your squad with upcoming match days in mind. Playing it allows you to make free unlimited transfers while remaining in budget, and any players you transfer in will stay in your squad once that match day is finished. The normal rules for automatic subs, manual subs, and captaincy changes still apply when your wildcard is active, as well as formation constraints and the number of players you can pick from one team. If you already made transfers ahead of a match day and then you play your wildcard, the transfers you made previously will be cancelled along with any points deduction. So if you take many hits, then you play the wildcard or limitless, all hits will be revoked and you won't lose any points whatsoever. To play a wildcard, select activate wildcard and then confirm the transfers you'd like to make. And once they are saved, your wildcard will be in play. And you can play it whenever except match day 1 and 4, which I talked about earlier, because those are the match days where you have unlimited transfers regardless. Now moving on to the limitless, it gives you the chance to pick your dream squad for 1 match day only. Playing it allows you to make unlimited free transfers for that match day with no budget restrictions. Once the match day is finished, your squad will go back to how it was before you played your limitless chip. The normal rules for automatic subs, manual subs, and captaincy changes still apply when playing the limitless, as well as formation constraints and the number of players you can pick from one team. So that's pretty much the same as the wildcard. The key difference though is that it only lasts for 1 match day, the limitless, and there are no budget restrictions whatsoever. And just make sure to activate your limitless by saving your transfers and hitting confirm on all of the moves you want to make, and any hits you take will be revoked and you won't lose any points whatsoever. The chip can only be used once as well. Now in terms of the point scoring system, it's also identical to FPL, but there are some key changes and I'll highlight them as we go along. And for those that play UCL Fantasy, it's pretty much the exact same here. The only real difference you're going to see is in the number of transfers you can make, particularly in the knockout stages, because in the Euros you play each team once in the group stages and the knockout phases, and in UCL Fantasy every single team plays each other twice until the Champions League final. But you get 1 point for an appearance and another point for playing 60 minutes. That's pretty much standard procedure. Goals outside the box is actually credited with an extra point on top of any points you will get for a forward scoring. You will get 4 points plus another one for scoring outside the box. Same with a midfielder, 5 points, then it becomes 6. For a defender or goalkeeper, 6 will then become 7. An assist will be credited with 3 points. And every free ball recoveries gives your outfield player an additional point. And this wasn't in the last Euros, which was quite surprising. But in UCL Fantasy, every single season, we see this point system in play. And we also saw it in World Cup Fantasy, and it makes everyone viable. For example, in UCL Fantasy, the top scoring player is Mats Hummels of 91 points, 26 more than Bellingham, who's in second place, and that's mainly down to ball recoveries. If a player wins the Player of the Match award, they will get 3 additional points, but there are no 2 points to 1 point in like a bonus system tier, as you see in FPL. Only one player gets the Player of the Match award and they get 3 points for that. Winning a penalty results in 2 points, even if that penalty isn't converted. So irrespective of the outcome, the player that wins the penalty is awarded 2 points. If a player concedes a penalty, you lose a point. Missing a penalty is also the same as FPL. You lose 2 points there. A yellow card results in -1 point, a red card in -3, and you can't substitute that player out. And an own goal results in -2. Now for goalkeepers specifically, if they score a goal, and if we see that in this Euro tournament, I'll be happy. It'll be a great thing to see, but it's very unlikely, of course, that goalkeeper will get 6 points. To be honest, I'd raise that to 10 plus, but that's just me personally. Saving a penalty results in 5 points being added. A clean sheet results in 4 points. Every 3 saves in 1 point. Every 2 goals conceded in -1. The exact same as any other fantasy format you have played. As for defenders, if they score a goal, they get 6 points. A clean sheet results in 4. Every 2 goals conceded in -1. A midfielder scoring a goal results in 5 points, a clean sheet in 1, and forwards get 4 points for scoring a goal. And as for assists, it's always free, regardless of if the player in question is a defender, midfielder, forward, or goalkeeper, if that were to happen as well. Now, points are usually calculated within 3 hours of the final whistle of the last match of the day, and some stats may be adjusted during this time based on information from referees or data providers. In the case of balls recovered, we'll calculate this stat when we calculate your points at the end of the day. There may be some discrepancy between the data in fantasy football and other sources, but once we calculate this number as part of the daily points calculation, it won't be adjusted afterwards, which is also very important. Bear in mind that once your points have been calculated, they can't be adjusted either. And there are just a few more rules to go through, and I know this may have been a long video with a lot of information, but I have highlighted the key ones you need to look out for in the rules section. I'd still recommend you read that because there might be a few other details that makes things clearer, but ultimately after watching this video and podcast, you will be a seasoned player in Euro Fantasy and be able to tell others how to play this game as well. So in terms of minutes played, every player who plays in a given match scores 1 point. Players score an extra point when they play 60 minutes, which you've covered already. Assists as well is also pretty much the standard stuff, but there is one key thing to note in Euro Fantasy and also in World Cup Fantasy and UCL Fantasy as well, where solo goals aren't credited with assists. And I've discussed this before with the example of Messi against Real Madrid in 2011. It's kind of a simple one where Busquets gets the ball, he just rolls it to Messi, who dribbles past 3, 4, 5, 6 players, and he slots it past Iker Casillas, and that is an iconic goal at the Santiago Bernabeu. That sort of goal would not have an assist credited by Sergio Busquets, and that's pretty much what's in play here. It's the same as Champions League Fantasy, but in FPL, you would get that assist, and that's a key difference there to look out for. In terms of clean sheets, players get points for a clean sheet when they play at least 60 minutes, excluding added time, and their team doesn't concede a goal while they're on the pitch. If a player's already been subbed off when their team concedes a goal, that player's clean sheet bonus won't be affected. As for Player of the Match, every single game will have a Player of the Match award, and that's awarded by UEFA's Technical Observer Panel. When a player wins this award, he'll score an extra 3 points, which is already covered as well. If a player gets a red card, they'll continue to be penalised for goals conceded by their team after they've been sent off, and that could always result in a disastrous -3, -4, -5 score. So you've got to be very careful with that, and also have a lot of luck on your side in terms of not having any players sent off. There are a few players, of course, that will be more prone to yellows and reds, but there's always an element of luck when it comes to this sort of thing. Now, extra time and penalties, the final thing to cover in the rules section. Players will keep scoring points throughout extra time. However, players who play 120 minutes don't get double points for appearance or clean sheet, so 2 times 60 minutes. And if a match goes to penalties, no points will be scored during the penalty shootout. So if a goalkeeper saves a few penalties there, they won't get any 5 pointers for each penalty saved. But maybe if a goalkeeper is a hero in a penalty shootout, you can see that player awarded Player of the Match. That's the only sort of way you could see a player really gain anything from a penalty shootout. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below about the rules. Do you prefer them to FPL? And for those that play UCL Fantasy, are you happy to see an identical system? To be honest, I'm quite happy with the rules in general. There's always a few that you'd like to see changed or to see a bit of refreshment for those that play this sort of fantasy game every single season, but I'm still quite happy with it. Let me now show you some of the things to really look out for when building your starting 11 and your squad, and taking some of the key principles of Euro Fantasy into practice. If you haven't already, check out my first draft for Euro Fantasy Football. There'll be more drafts headed your way, the team selection, best wildcard and limitless teams from Matchday 2 onwards, deadline streams every single match day, and much more. But what I want to show you is the captaincy and the substitutions, just so you have a visual aid in terms of how things work in general. So I've currently got Wirtz as my captain because he plays on the 14th of June against Scotland, and the way it works is if he blanks or doesn't perform that well, maybe he just gets an assist and I want more from my captain, then what we can do is toggle it by date and see who plays on the 15th of June. And in this case, I'll pick out DeMarco as one particular example. I can then make him the captain after Germany versus Scotland is over and before Italy versus Albania begins. So I make DeMarco captain. If he also blanks or doesn't perform particularly well, I can then swap to someone playing on the 16th of June. In this case, I would go for Harry Kane. And then after that, I've got plenty to choose from in Lukaku or Mbappe. Let's say, for example, I'd go for Mbappe on the 17th of June. And finally, on the 18th, I can bring on the likes of Cancelo or Bruno Fernandes for my lowest scoring players and then captain one of them as well. And we can just bring one of them in quite easily. We'll put Bruno Fernandes in for, let's say, Xherdan Shaqiri, and then I can put Bruno Fernandes as my captain too. But what you want to achieve is have everyone on your bench playing later in the match day. Those playing on the 14th of June, don't have them on your bench. In my case, it'd be Mittelstadt or Wirtz. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at risk of relying on automatic substitutions taking place and someone missing out entirely from your starting 11 and not playing any single minutes. And you don't want that to happen. You want to be in full control of your transfers, the captaincy, and the substitutions as well. Of course, you can't make transfers within a match day, but any transfer you do make will be for the next match day and deadline. So hopefully that's all clear. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 24,000 subscribers and beyond. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon, the Championships Discord server, Euro Fantasy League, Draft Hound, as well as Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to supporting the channel. I wish you all the best of luck for the Euro Fantasy tournament, as well as UCL Fantasy for the Champions League final, and I'll see you next time.